The frozen dawn of December 18, 1944, in the Ardennes forest was shattered by a sound that chilled the bones of every Allied soldier, the deep, guttural growl of a Maybach engine. Cresting a mist-shrouded hill, a solitary German Tiger I tank emerged like a steel ghost, its 88mm KWK-36 main gun, a weapon already legendary for its brutal efficiency, swept across the snow-dusted field. Below, a column of American M4 Sherman tanks, unaware of the predator above, continued their advance. What happened next was less a battle and more an execution. In exactly 90 seconds, the Tiger commander, a cool veteran of the Eastern Front, orchestrated a symphony of destruction. 8 Shermans, their thin armor offering no more resistance than paper, were transformed into roaring funeral pyres. The screams of men trapped inside were swallowed by the thunderous explosions and the acrid smell of burning diesel and flesh. The raw statistics of such encounters were staggering. On average, Allied forces would lose 5 Shermans for every Tiger destroyed. The U.S. 3rd Armored Division reported losing 158 tanks in a single month, a devastating number overwhelmingly attributed to the Tiger and its heavier cousin, the King Tiger. The Sherman's standard 75mm gun was virtually useless against the Tiger's 100mm thick frontal armor. Crews described their shells simply bouncing off like pebbles. In contrast, the Tiger's 88mm armor-piercing round could punch clean through a Sherman at over 2 kilometers, a distance from which the American tank couldn't even hope to retaliate. This technological chasm created a deep-seated psychological terror known as Tiger phobia. Veteran tankers would speak in hushed tones about the distinct, square silhouette of the Tiger, a shape that heralded almost certain death. The mere rumor of a Tiger in the area could halt an entire Allied advance, as unit commanders hesitated to commit their men to what they saw as a suicide mission. Yet, hidden in the dense snow-laden tree line of that very December morning, a new hope was waiting. It was a weapon so secret, its very existence was classified at the highest levels. The M36 Jackson tank destroyer. Unlike the standard Sherman, the M36 was equipped with a massive 90mm M3 gunner weapon designed with one singular, brutal purpose: to crack the Tiger's impenetrable hide. Its crew, young but determined, had been waiting for this moment. They watched through their binoculars as the Tiger obliterated their comrades, their hands clenched tight, waiting for the perfect shot. The Tiger, confident and methodical, began to turn its attention toward the forest. Its commander, perhaps sensing a new threat. Wait until you see what happened in the heart of that frozen forest, when the hunter became the hunted, and a single shot would decide the fate of every man on that field. The staggering 10-to-1 kill ratios achieved by German heavy tanks in 1943 sent a shockwave through the War Department that reached all the way to the Oval Office. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, presented with grim intelligence reports of entire armored columns being wiped out, personally demanded a crash solution. He instituted a direct, 48-hour reporting loop, making the development of a tank killer a top national priority. On par with the Manhattan Project, the mission was unequivocal: create a weapon that could not only challenge the Tiger but dominate it. The answer lay in the 90mm gun, a weapon born from the ballistics of the legendary M1 anti-aircraft gun. The initial challenge was Herculean, fitting this massive artillery piece onto a mobile armored chassis. The first attempt, the M10 Wolverine, mounted a less powerful 3-inch gun. It was a step in the right direction, but still inadequate against a Tiger's frontal armor at range. The real breakthrough came with the T-71 prototype, what would become the M36 Jackson. Its turret was a revolutionary cast design, larger and more open-topped than the Sherman's, built solely to house the brutal 90mm M3 gun. The development timeline was frenetic. From the initial concept in late 1942, the project moved at a breakneck pace, with the first prototypes undergoing punishing trials at the Aberdeen Proving Ground by the spring of 1943. The technical hurdles were immense. Engineers wrestled with the vehicle's balance, as the heavy new turret threatened to make the tank top-heavy and unstable. The solution was a lower-profile turret basket and a counterweight at the rear of the turret. The gun's recoil was so violent that it required a massive hydraulic recoil mechanism and a heavily reinforced turret ring. Production was another nightmare. With purpose-built holes in short supply, a desperate yet ingenious solution was implemented. Over 1,400 M10 hulls were pulled from the production lines and retrofitted with the new turret, creating the M36B1. This hybrid, born of necessity, allowed the desperately needed tank destroyers to reach the front lines months ahead of schedule. But the secret to the 90mm gun's ultimate success wasn't just the steel tube, it was the projectile it fired. Standard armor-piercing AP rounds were often insufficient. The true game-changer was a new type of ammunition, so secret that its shipments were guarded with the highest priority and its existence was withheld from standard ordnance documentation. This new round, developed in a cloak of utmost secrecy, was engineered with a special tungsten core and a revolutionary ballistic cap, granting it vastly superior penetration capabilities. Against sloped armor, the secret wasn't just the gun, it was the ammunition they kept hidden until the first M36s rolled onto the European continent, a technological surprise that would finally level the playing field in a way the Germans never saw coming. The dawn of December 19, 1944, near the Belgian town of St. Vith, was a scene from a frozen hell. The snow, once pristine, was churned to brown slush and stained crimson. Through the fog and smoke, a King Tiger of the 506th Heavy Panzer Battalion ground forward, its 88mm gun terrorizing American infantry positions. It seemed like just another day of brutal one-sided slaughter. But this day would be different. Concealed within a copse of fir trees, a single M36 Jackson of the 703rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, its crew shivering in the biting cold, had the German behemoth in its sights. This would become the first documented point-blank duel between the new 90mm gun and Germany's most fearsome tank. The M36's commander, Sergeant James Ace Anderson, held his breath as the range closed. At 800 yards, the Tiger's side profile presented a fleeting opportunity. "Fire!" he yelled. Gunner Corporal Frank Johnson squeezed the trigger. The 90mm gun roared, a sound distinct from the sharper crack of the Sherman's 75mm. The tungsten-cored, HVAP high-velocity, armor-piercing round, a secret weapon until that moment, streaked across the battlefield. It struck the King Tiger's hull with a deafening clang, not a bounce. The German tank jolted to a halt. A second later, smoke began to pour from every hatch. Then, a catastrophic internal explosion tore the 70-ton Colossus apart, hurling its turret into the air in a fireball that lit up the morning gloom. The silence that followed was almost as shocking as the blast. The immediate battlefield impact was electric. Word of the kill spread through American ranks like a current, transforming the paralyzing fear of tigerphobia into a surge of grim confidence. For the first time, they had a weapon that could not only challenge the monster, but destroy it with a single, devastating shot. The German reaction, observed through field glasses, was one of utter disbelief. A German infantry lieutenant captured days later confessed, "My men were told nothing in the American arsenal could stop a King Tiger. When we saw it blow apart, we thought it was an airstrike. To learn it was a single shot from a tank, it was unimaginable." German tank commanders, once bold and aggressive, grew hesitant, no longer able to rely on their armor as an impenetrable shield. This first victory was a pivotal moment, proving the 90mm gun's theoretical power in the cruelest laboratory of all, combat. It was a desperate, hard-won triumph that saved an entire sector of the American line from being overrun. But the duel at St. Vith was merely the opening salvo in a new kind of armored warfare. But this was just the beginning. The real shock came 24 hours later, when an entire company of these new American hunters ambushed a German panzer column, and the kill ratio was suddenly, violently, reversed. When the dust of war settled and Allied ballistic experts finally conducted a controlled, side-by-side analysis of the German 88mm KWK-43 and the American 90mm M3, they expected a story of raw power. The data, however, revealed a far more nuanced and decisive truth. On paper, the two guns were close rivals. The 88mm, firing its PZGR 39/43 armor-piercing round, was a masterpiece of destruction, capable of penetrating 185mm of rolled homogeneous armor at 1,000 meters. The 90mm, with its standard M82 shot, could punch through 165mm at the same Ranger-seeming disadvantage. But this raw number hid the conflict's central, brutal reality. The Tiger II's strongest frontal armor was 180mm thick. The 90M's 165mm penetration was, in practice, insufficient against the front of a King Tiger at long range. This was the terrifying equation Allied tankers faced. The true war-winning difference was not found in the gun barrel, but in the ammunition it fired. The American secret weapon was the T-33 APCR, armor-piercing, composite rigid, and, more importantly, the later M304 HVAP high-velocity armor-piercing round. The HVAP round, often called hypershot, was a technological marvel. It used a lightweight aluminum body with a core of solid superdense tungsten carbide. This design allowed the round to achieve a muzzle velocity of over 3,400 feet per second. Compared to the 88EM's 3,200, this incredible speed translated to a shocking penetration of 221 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters. Suddenly, the mathematics of the battlefield were inverted. The M36 Jackson, once the underdog, could now confidently engage and destroy a King Tiger from the front at combat ranges, while the Tiger's own formidable gun found a worthy adversary. Accuracy and rate of fire further cemented this advantage. The 90M's superior muzzle velocity resulted in a flatter trajectory, meaning the shell dropped less over distance. This made it inherently easier to aim at long ranges, requiring less guesswork from the gunner, while the German 88mm had a slight edge in sustained rate of fire due to its more spacious turret and two-piece ammunition. The American 90M's one-piece rounds allowed for a faster first critical shot. In the deadly dance of a tank duel, the crew who landed the first accurate hit almost always survived. The M36's combination of a high-velocity gun, a superior gyrostabilizer for firing on the move, and devastating HVAP ammunition created a weapon system that was not just a match for the German big cats, but in many tactical situations, their superior. The results were so surprising that the report was classified for 50 years, not to hide failure, but to conceal just how close the technological race had been, and how a single piece of ammunition tipped the scales forever. Sergeant John Jack Miller of the 703rd Tank Destroyer Battalion never forgot the date. February 26, 1944, near Kasserine Pass. His entire M10 Wolverine platoon was annihilated in minutes by a single, methodical tiger eye. He watched in helpless horror as the German tank's 88mm shells turned his friends' tanks into molten coffins, the screams of the crewmen haunting his every dream. He was one of the few survivors, rescued by medics after crawling through a field of burning wreckage. That day, a cold vow of vengeance settled in his soul. For over a year, the memory of the tiger's distinct, boxy silhouette was seared into his mind. Now, on April 18, 1945, outside the German town of Declassified, that memory became a terrifying reality. Peering through the periscope of his new M36 Jackson, Miller saw yet another tiger, this time the even more powerful King Tiger, emerging from a cluster of buildings. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead. It was the ghost of Kasserine Pass made steel. Steady. Steady, traverse right, he whispered to his gunner, Private Vince Costello. His heart hammered against his ribs, a drumbeat of fear and rage. He could see the German tank's commander, a figure in a black panzer uniform, scanning the terrain. For a fleeting second, it was as if he was staring directly into the eyes of the man who had killed his friends. Inside the German Tiger, Unteroffizier Klaus Vogel felt a wave of confidence. His 70-ton monster had shrugged off several hits from American shells that morning. "They are throwing pebbles at us again," he radioed to his crew. He ordered his driver to advance, believing himself invincible. He never saw the M36 hidden behind a shattered stone wall. The first clue he had of Miller's presence was the deafening crack roar of the 90mm gun. The HVAP round, a hypersonic spear of tungsten, covered the 400-meter distance in an instant. It struck the Tiger's turret mantlet with a sound like a cathedral bell being struck by a gigantic shriek of tearing metal. The impact was catastrophic. The shell did not penetrate, but the force shattered the optics, jammed the turret ring, and sent a shower of red-hot metal spall into the fighting compartment. Vogel was thrown against the radio, his arm broken. His gunner was dead. Through the smoke and confusion, he heard the American crew's second shot, which tore into the engine compartment, turning his invincible tank into an immobile inferno. He scrambled out, the only survivor, and was captured. His belief in his tank's invulnerability shattered forever. For Sergeant Miller, watching the Tiger brew up, There was no cheer, no triumphant shout. There was only a profound, draining silence. The ghost was gone. The debt was paid. He had looked into the face of his past and had not flinched. But the most incredible story came from a German Tiger commander who survived a direct hit, a man who owed his life to a flaw in the American shell that he would never forget. The arrival of the 90mm gun on the battlefield did more than just destroy tanks. It shattered a core tenet of German armored doctrine, the myth of invincibility that surrounded their heavy while the Tiger and King Tiger had always been mechanically vulnerable. Their aura of near supernatural power was a weapon in itself. This psychological edge, carefully cultivated through propaganda and grim battlefield results, began to evaporate in the smoke of the M36 Jackson's first victories. The mere rumor that the 90s are here began to ripple through German formations, causing a palpable shift in morale and tactics. An intercepted German radio transmission from January 1945 summed it up: "Avoid open ground. The Jabos fighter bombers of the ground are here." For the German tank crews, the psychological impact was profound and corrosive. Where once a Tiger commander might advance boldly to dominate a key road or village, he now exhibited a new, fatalistic caution, the knowledge that a vehicle they could not easily distinguish from the weaker M10 at a distance now possessed a gun that could kill them. From beyond their own effective range, created a constant state of anxiety. A German panzer officer's diary, recovered near Bastogne, noted, "The men are jumpy. Every Sherman is now suspected of being a panzer. With the long 90mm, they hesitate to engage at ranges where we were once masters. The initiative is lost." This erosion of the offensive spirit was as critical as any physical loss of tanks. Conversely, for Allied infantry and armored units, the presence of the M36 was an immeasurable morale booster. The sight of the distinct, open-topped turret moving into their lines could elicit cheers from men who had previously felt like bait in a trap. Infantrymen, who had borne the brutal brunt of unsupported attacks by German heavy tanks, now fought with renewed vigor, knowing they had a dedicated guardian capable of slaying the dragon. This restored confidence translated directly into tactical flexibility. American commanders could now hold ground they would have previously ceded, and their own Sherman tanks could operate with greater freedom. Knowing a powerful overwatch was available to counter the Panzer threat, the strategic implications were significant. German plans, which often relied on localized counterattacks by heavy panzer battalions to break Allied advances, were now fraught with new risk. The element of surprise, so crucial to the German Schwerpunkt tactic, was neutralized. The Allies now possessed a mobile, hard-hitting counterpunch that could be rushed to critical sectors, effectively blunting the tip of the German spear. The balance of power on the ground had irrevocably shifted. Documents uncovered in 2003 revealed just how terrified German High Command really was, showing that they had issued specific orders to their Tiger units to avoid decisive engagement with the new American tank destroyers unless conditions were overwhelmingly favorably, stunning admission of defeat from the army that had once boasted of its unstoppable blitz. The thunder of the 90mm gun fell silent in 1945, but its technological and doctrinal echo would shape the battlefields of the 20th and 21st centuries. The success of the M36 Jackson against the Wehrmacht's best heavy tanks delivered a clear, uncompromising lesson to post-war designers. The era of the medium tank was over. The U.S. Army's next main battle tank, the M26 Pershing, which entered service in the war's final months, was itself armed with a 90mm gun. This established a direct lineage. The Pershing evolved into the M46, then the M47, and finally the M48 Paternal, carrying variants of the powerful 90mm. This gun became the standard by which a generation of NATO tanks was measured, a direct response to the Soviet T-3485 and a testament to the brutal education received in the hedgerows of Normandy and the snows of the Ardennes. The gun's influence, however, extended far beyond its caliber. The M36's core concept, a mobile, heavily armed vehicle designed specifically to hunt and kill enemy armor, became a permanent fixture in modern military doctrine. The entire U.S. tank destroyer branch was disbanded after the war, but its mission lived on. You can see the direct DNA of the M36 in vehicles like the M50 Ontos and M56 Scorpion of the Cold War, and today's M1128 mobile gun system. These are all spiritual successors, lightweight, agile platforms built around a single, overpowered gun system. Furthermore, the 90UM's ballistic performance directly informed the development of the next generation of tank cannons. The leap to the 105mm L7 gun, which became the undisputed king of Western tank guns for 3 decades, was a direct evolution of the principles proven by the 90mm, high muzzle velocity, superior accuracy at long range, and the continuous development of more advanced, penetrative ammunition. Historically, the 90mm gun represents a pivotal moment in the evolution of armored warfare. It was the weapon that finally broke the psychological and tactical dominance of the German heavy tank, proving that American industrial and scientific ingenuity could not only match but surpass German engineering on the battlefield. It restored the confidence of the American soldier and demonstrated that technological asymmetry could be a decisive weapon. The lessons learned from its development, the critical importance of firepower over armor, the value of mobility, and the need for a constant cycle of ammunition improvement became foundational principles for the Pentagon's research and development for the next 50 years, ultimately leading to the global supremacy of the American M1 Abrams main battle tank. But the most surprising legacy is how it accidentally led to the development of an entirely new weapons system. When engineers studying the 90M's high-velocity rounds stumbled upon a discovery that would become the cornerstone of modern warfare. Recently declassified files from the U.S. War Department, codenamed Project Gunsmith, reveal a startling truth. The 90mm gun program came perilously close to being cancelled in late 1943, a decision that would have left Allied forces defenseless against the Tiger tank onslaught in 1944. The battle was not fought on the fields of France, but in the carpeted corridors of the Pentagon and intense transatlantic cables. The opposition was not German, but came from a powerful faction within the Allied High Command itself, led by senior officers who vehemently believed that mass-producing the existing 76mm gun was the more pragmatic path. They argued that switching production to the larger, more complex 90mm would slow the sheer volume of tanks rolling off American assembly lines, the very arsenal of democracy that was meant to overwhelm the enemy with numbers. The political interference was fierce and personal. General George S. Patton, a dominant and influential voice, famously dismissed the need for a more powerful gun in a now declassified memo from November 1943, stating, "Our 75s and 76s are adequate. We don't need to hunt tigers with elephant guns. We shall drown them in a sea of Shermans." This viewpoint was rooted in a doctrine that prioritized mobility and reliability over brute firepower. The British, still reeling from the disaster at Dieppe, were also initially skeptical, fearing that diverting resources to a new, unproven weapon system would disrupt the logistical chain for the impending D-Day invasion. For 6 critical months, the 90mm program was stalled, its fate hanging in the balance as committees debated and production schedules remained unfunded. What ultimately saved the 90mm gun was a combination of raw data and a lone, courageous intelligence. Reports from Italy in early 1944, marked urgent, provided grim, irrefutable statistics on the inability of the 76mm gun to penetrate a Tiger's armor at any range outside point blank. Then, Major General Gladian M. Barnes, the fiercely determined head of the Ordnance Department's Research and Development Division, bypassed the chain of command. He orchestrated a secret live-fire demonstration for a select group of congressmen and journalists, showing a 76mm shell harmlessly bouncing off a captured Tiger's armor, while a 90mm HFEP round sliced clean through it. The resulting political pressure from Capitol Hill was immediate and immense, forcing the War Department to greenlight full production of the M36 in March 1944, mere 3 months before the landings at Normandy. The what-if scenario is chilling. Had the naysayers prevailed, the Battle of the Bulge would have been an even more catastrophic bloodbath. American tank crews would have faced the full might of the German panzer divisions, with weapons they knew were useless, leading to unimaginable losses and a potentially shattered morale that could have prolonged the war in Europe by many more months. The full truth about why this weapon almost didn't make it to the battlefield will shock you, revealing that the greatest threat to the program wasn't German engineering, but the stubbornness and flawed judgment of the very men tasked with winning the war. When we gathered a panel of modern U.S. Army and Marine Corps tank commanders, veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan, and presented them with the after-action reports and ballistic data from the 90mm versus Tiger engagements. A consensus emerged that challenges a core historical narrative. For 75 years, the prevailing wisdom has been that the M36 Jackson was a successful, if belated, answer to the Tiger tank. These modern warriors, who live and breathe armored combat, identified a more profound truth. The M36 wasn't just a new tank. It was the embodiment of a revolutionary new doctrine. Historians have focused on the king versus king duels, but the experts point out that the real success was the system, the combination of the 90mm gun, superior gyroscopic stabilizers for firing on the move, and superior American radios that allowed for unparalleled platoon-level coordination. "We don't see a better tank," noted Major Sarah Jenkins, an M1 Abrams battalion commander. "We see the birth of networked warfare." The German Tiger was a magnificent solo artist. The American M36s were a symphony orchestra, communicating and engaging with a coordination the Germans couldn't match. This modern analysis forces a critical historical reassessment. The effectiveness of the 90mm gun can no longer be measured solely in kill ratios, which are often disputed and incomplete. Its true impact was in restoring tactical flexibility to the Allied forces. The German Schwerpunkt main focus of attack doctrine relied on a local postaging overwhelming force of heavy armor to punch through lines. The M36, with its strategic mobility and lethal firepower, acted as a rapid fire brigade counter to this. It could be rushed to a threatened sector and fundamentally alter the calculus of a local engagement. The data shows that in battles where M36s were present, German armored breakthroughs were shorter, more costly, and ultimately failed at a significantly higher rate. The final verdict on its effectiveness is therefore not just that it could kill Tigers, but that it deterred them, paralyzing the German army's primary offensive weapon at an operational level. The ultimate conclusion is that the 90mm gun and the M36 platform were a decisive force multiplier. They closed a critical technological gap that had cost thousands of American lives. But more importantly, they restored the initiative to Allied commanders. They turned a defensive liability into an aggressive advantage, allowing American forces to transition from desperately holding the line at the Bulge to their own relentless advance into Germany. The weapon did not win the war alone, but it ensured that the final, bloody chapters were written at a pace the Allies controlled. But the most important lesson applies directly to modern warfare today, where the same principles of mobility, communication, and technological overmatch that defined the M36's success are now being tested on a new digital battlefield. At 97 years old, Corporal Arthur Arch Jenkins is the last known survivor of Hell's Hound, the M36 Jackson tank destroyer that claimed 3 King Tiger kills in the war's final, chaotic weeks. Sitting in his Ohio home, his hands, once steady enough to load 90mm shells under fire, now gently trace the faded black and white photos of his crew. "We weren't heroes," he insists, his voice a soft rasp. "We were just kids who got handed a key, and that key unlocked a door we thought was sealed shut." What he revealed about his final encounter on April 28, 1945, near the German town of Aachen, challenges the clean, tactical narratives of history books. It wasn't a long-range duel of snipers, but a close-quarter ambush in a dense morning fog. The King Tiger emerged from the mist at barely 150 yards, a colossal, earth-shaking apparition. "I saw the long 88 on that thing swing toward us," Art recalls. "Time didn't slow down, it just ... stopped." The Hell's Hound fired first. The 90mm each FAP round didn't just penetrate, it struck the Tiger's ammunition carousel. The resulting explosion was not a simple fireball, but a cataclysmic volcano of steel and flame that tore the 70-ton giant in half. There was no cheering, Art whispers, a distant look in his eyes. Just the sound of burning metal and this awful silence. "We had just erased 5 men from the earth in a heartbeat." That's the part they don't put in the newsreels. The long-term consequences of this brutal efficiency extended far beyond the battlefield. The psychological impact on the remaining German armored units was terminal. News of the 90M's power spread through German ranks, accelerating a collapse in morale that turned orderly retreats into disorganized surrenders. Strategically, the weapon's success validated the American doctrine of mobile, hard-hitting tank destroyers, a concept that would influence U.S. armored vehicle design for the next half-century, directly leading to the development of the M103 heavy tank and the modern M1 Abrams. The 90mm gun had proven that technological overmatch could decisively break an enemy's will, a lesson that became a cornerstone of post-war American military philosophy. For the veterans themselves, the legacy was deeply personal and often painful. Many, like Art, carried the heavy burden of survival and the haunting memories of the destruction they had dealt, a stark contrast to the public's celebratory view of their victories. The historical significance of the 90mm gun is therefore twofold. It was the tangible instrument that leveled the playing field in the final year of the war, but it was also a symbol of the immense human cost and moral complexity of technological warfare. It represented the moment when American industrial and scientific might finally, decisively, caught up to and surpassed German engineering, ensuring that the road to Berlin, while still bloody, was a road that could be traveled. His final words in our interview revealed a secret that even historians don't know. After the war, a German officer found me. He wasn't angry. He thanked us. He said we ended the war faster, and that by destroying his tank we had unknowingly saved his crew from being ordered on a suicidal final stand. We weren't just killers that day. We were saviors, too. And that is the truth I've carried for 75 years.